Looks like we are live once again. My name is Manny Wolf. This is the Manny Wolf Show. Today, my guest, I'm the host, is SHONT'E JOVAN Taylor. She is a neuroscientist, and we're going to talk today about how biases are created. We're going to see, or how they're sustained, maybe. I don't know. We're going to see where that takes us. And hopefully by the end of it, you will have the ability to look at your own thinking a little bit more critically. Because I think we are in desperate need right now of the ability to exercise critical thinking. SHONT'E, welcome. I am so glad to have you.
Yes, likewise. Thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for watching today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's do the sort of mandatory prerequisite. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. We'll move through that as fast as we can and get to the good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. So I am a neuroscientist and success strategist. I did not start off that way. My background is in literally neuroscience and clinical neuropsychology. So I spent 15 years plus studying what was wrong with the brain. So I did a lot of research on brain injuries and dementia and worked with Alzheimer's patients and things of that nature. But it wasn't the route that I felt I wanted to go for the next 40, 50 years because it just didn't light me up. So now I actually train people, coaches and leaders all over the planet, how to understand the brain better to enhance and access more of their human potential, more of their genius, and to show up more powerfully and have more of a powerful human experience in their everyday life and business and profession. I
like that part. I like how to have a more powerful human experience. Yes. I want to talk about some things that are not exactly that, but that is most of us. I don't know. I find social media to be a fascinating sort of metadata place. You know, it's a place to, if you go into it and you start to argue with Joe and Susie and agree with Steve and Vera, you're missing what it can be. If you keep a 1,000-foot view, it's a really sort of an interesting way to take the temperature of where people are at. And I think that many of us are not living the kind of life that you just talked about.
Yeah. I mean, even I wasn't, right? Yeah. If I'm spending 8 to 10 hours a day looking for what's wrong with people, you know, literally what's wrong with their brains, and then telling them this is wrong with your brain, and I'm telling their family members, I'm really shaping my own brain and awareness to do that outside my work. So now I'm bringing that home. I'm looking at what's wrong with everybody. What are the mistakes?
Right.
You know? So I didn't like that part of showing up because everything we do, the brain is the center of everything we do, you know, in our personal lives, and it intersects with our professions and how we see the world and how we treat each other.
So you just said something really interesting. You said you were shaping your brain by doing that. Absolutely. I'm going to need you to expand on that. What the heck are you talking about? Isn't our brain shaped like a brain?
The brain is shaped like a brain, but it's a beautiful instrument. It's this organic piece of technology that grows and shapes according to our experiences, how we challenge ourselves, what we learn. It's always growing and developing. Okay. And we can do that more intentionally. So in neuroscience, we call it neuroplasticity. Really, it's like, if you look at a tree and it has branches, that's how our brains, how it's shaped. So we have 100 billion neurons, brain cells approximately, that look like trees, and it has branches. And every time we learn and challenge ourselves and have experiences, whether good or bad, every time we're having a conversation, you know, and we're learning about each other, our brain cells are growing and growing branches to that experience, to that memory, to that behavior, to that way of thinking and being. So it's just a beautiful organ all around, and it truly is shaping who we are as individuals and who we are shaping, how we shape people in our lives. We are very connected. We're connected, and how we show up really affects them, people in our lives mentally. I mean, we have the neuroscience to say when I smile, your brain is lighting up as if it's smiling, right? unconsciously. So there's a lot of things going on unconsciously. So we have to be very aware of what we are feeding our minds, what we're putting in our minds, and we need to do, grow our brains intentionally and, consciously as well.
So this idea of shaping our brains, what we're talking about, if I understand you correctly, is we have the power to choose what we focus on, of course, right?
Yes.
And I think that maybe that's not as sort of widely known as you and I might assume. But what we focus on then sort of determines what our brain finds or filters for in the future. Is that right?
Yeah, your brain, it's a goal achieving machine. Okay. So it's going to work regardless if we give it instructions or not. So we were just talking about this earlier. Many people don't even use their brains intentionally. You don't even think about it. You just kind of really take it for granted that it's going to move your muscles when you get up in the morning, open up your eyes, go to the restroom and do all your daily activities. But we can consciously and intentionally use our brains to design it for our goals, right? For our lives. And so we have to do specific, first of all, we have to give it a goal. And then we have to do specific activities and tasks that will enhance and focus our brains on that particular goal. And your brain will naturally start to prioritize what it needs to in order to reach that goal. It is a goal achieving machine if we direct it and use it intentionally.
That's fascinating to me. I've heard similar things, but never that. I've never heard it directly said it's a goal attaining machine.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways, if we know this, if we accept that it's a goal attaining machine, let me do this. If we accept that it's a goal attaining machine, what's the first thing we need to do to either calibrate or prime it so that it can start to do that?
Okay. There's not one thing, but the first thing is really put your brain in the condition in order to be able to focus and accomplish your goals. So what that means is once you put your brain in the position, you optimize how it will use mental energy. So the brain is also a hungry energy machine. Okay. It uses up 20% of the total body energy.
Right.
That means it's using more energy than any other organ in your body.
Right.
So the brain doesn't want to naturally use a lot of mental energy. That's why a lot of things are on the subconscious level. A lot of mental habits, unconscious, subconscious activities like the beating of our heart, making new brain cells, getting out of bed, all that. We already know how to do that. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you don't have to use mental energy to learn how to ride a bike. So in order for you to put your brain in the optimal position or conditions or environment, your brain is going to want to use mental energy to learn something new. But if you're stressed out, if you're burnt out, if you're not doing the human activities like getting enough sleep or feeding your neurons, which your brain cells are very different than your muscle cells or your heart cells or anything like that. So it requires a certain kind of nutrition. And if you're putting in the knowledge, the skill sets that help, that also puts your brain in a certain environment to thrive for that particular goal. So there's a compilation of things you have to do to put it in the environment to use up the energy that your brain is naturally resistant to using up, because it's a survival mechanism, right? Gathering days, we didn't want to use mental energy to do the same things over and over. We wanted to use that mental energy to learn how to survive more, or go hunt or be alert and all of that. So we're in modern times, so we have to think of how to use our brain in a modern.
Not a lot of risk of saber-toothed tiger anymore.
Right.
Right? Yeah, right.
But our brain still uses the same.
But right.
So when we start thinking about our goals, some of those goals scare the bejesus out of us, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I want to be an entrepreneur, but that means I have to leave my job. That means I have to get clients on my own, and you activate, that ancient part of the brain that is wired for fear and threat, to your survival. So we have to manage. That's another thing we have to do. Learn to manage that fear brain, that primitive brain, for modern goals. And that's a whole set of things.
A couple of things that I want to know. What do we feed the brain? But another thing you said too that I want to sort of stack onto that is you made it sound as though what we choose to think about and focus on functions as a kind of fuel or food for the brain as well.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about that. Tell me more about first the actual nutrition, because I put butter in my coffee every morning, and I swear to you, my brain thanks me every day. Mm-hmm. Hopefully I'm right about that. But so tell us about the nutrition, and then could you expand a little bit on how certain things that we focus on sort of fuel our brain?
Absolutely. So glucose, which is a very simple sugar, is the main source of fuel for the brain. And that is what is going to make the energy for your 100 billion brain cells to talk to each other at 200 miles per hour. Remember, there's a lot of things your body is doing that you are not even thinking about.
Right.
So most of that energy is going towards that. So any new energy that it needs to create or utilize, you're going to have to make sure your brain is fueled. The anatomy, it's a lot with nutrition, but
I know.
Just the basic anatomy of the brain cell, you do have some fatty acids that help to propagate information to the next cell, That's where your butter comes in, right? That's where your omegas come in. Okay. So we want to be able to think fast. So we need to make sure our brain cells have that fatty layer that is replenished and taken care of and repaired and all that. Our cells have to repair themselves just like, we have to, put a Band-Aid on a cut or something like that. So that takes mental energy. So fat is good. Now, all fats are not created equally, and you can Google, all kind of different the good fats and the bad fats. So avocados are good, stuff like that. The brain also requires multivitamins, because there are trace minerals and certain vitamins that help to maintain the integrity of your 100 billion brain cells. So I mean, I could train a whole day just on brain nutrition. You want to make sure you have protein, because protein is what makes up those neurotransmitters, and little neurotransmitters are basically little molecules that allow your brain cells to communicate and talk to each other. Right. So really, nutrition is really to make sure your brain is fueled and has the mental energy to be able to think through and ward off things that will take you off your focus. It takes a lot of mental energy to focus on one thing. Yeah. Okay, so if you find that your focus is, going off, maybe you're low in the molecules needed to sustain, the energy making molecules of the brain.
So right there, if we found that, what might we turn to in terms of nutrition and food to help us? Is it butter? Is it avocados? What's a good source of simple glucose? We're in the middle of a homework binge or something, right? And we've got to get it done, or a deadline of some sort. And it's like all of a sudden we can't think. Where do we turn for like quick mental energy in terms of nutrition?
Mental energy. Well, really anything in the Mediterranean diet. So you got
no kidding.
Your nuts, your oils, your fishes, your protein. That's been in the neuroscience community the best diet to be able to follow for an optimal brain. Okay, so for me, when I'm low in mental energy, I will, eat some nuts, some trail mix, because then you have your minerals that are good for the brain. You have a quick source of protein, and you have some carbohydrates. Perfect. Okay, carbohydrates is the fuel, because it breaks down into the glucose molecules. It's the fuel. But some people intermittent fast, and so your brain is able to utilize another source called ketones in the fasting state that can serve as as fuel for the brain. Sometimes
Right.
your brain is just depleted. Sometimes it's going to take some time for your brain to replenish energy, what's called ATP in the brain, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you can start thinking again. So maybe you need to take a break and rest your brain and do something different, and of course feed it, but your brain needs time to replenish as well. So there's a few things you would need to self-assess, because your brain, your prefrontal cortex, the most advanced part of your brain, it can only work for a certain amount of time before it gets depleted of mental energy. So I mean, the time factor is important to notice, if you are low in focus.
Well, I know all about depleted brain, so that's sort of my specialty. All you have to do is look back over my teens and 20s, and you never doubt it. So what about the idea that what we choose to focus on and think about? Because I feel like you said the brain is a goal-setting machine. I feel like it's this self-actualization machine too. You know what I mean? Like you can choose. There's a great line in a song by Rush where he says, "If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice." Yeah. And I think in this conversation, that idea, which is very poetic on its face, goes a little deeper, because you got this thing. We all get one.
We all get one. Yeah.
We all get one. Many of us, I always think about teenagers when I talk to, my son and my daughter, trying to make them understand that you can actually think about your thoughts and have sort of metacognition. And they look at me like I'm speaking Urdu, right? They just like, there's no way. They're just like, don't even drag that in here. Okay. We're busy feeling our feelings, and the world is what, but I don't know about most people. A lot of people go into adulthood and through their whole lives without ever kicking up out of that sort of like, never getting into metacognition. Mm-hmm. When you get into metacognition, you choose what. Let me see if I can nail this. You can choose what you focus on, which in turn creates a brain that is healthier and better able to focus. Is that right?
Yes, you're definitely on the right track. So some people use the brain and the mind interchangeably. But in neuroscience, we've concluded that the mind is a separate entity. Not that you can't still use it interchangeably, but the mind is the observer. The mind directs the flow of information and energy of the physical brain.
Okay.
So the mind is like this higher awareness, if you will.
The part that I'm referring to as the metacognition.
Yes.
Okay. We call that the mind.
We call that the mind.
Now I know how to talk to neuroscientists.
Yes, exactly. So you are, in a sense, observing yourself.
Yeah.
Realize, and your kids, us as teenagers, we're always, there are times when we are observing our own thoughts. When you hear your own voice, that's your mind. That's you observing your own thinking and being. And so we're always doing it, but we can do it even more powerfully when we have more self-awareness, and when we're intentional about observing our thoughts and our patterns and behaviors, when we specifically create those moments where we can reflect on ourselves. And that's where you get the power of meditation, to be able to do. It makes that mind muscle stronger, that sense of self-awareness. When you have that level of self-awareness, you have, your fuse is longer, you're not irritated. You can focus better. You can think before you speak, so when you're interacting with someone, you're being more mindful of how you say things and if you should say it, right? So I believe that understanding the brain and mind at those different layers, it's one thing to understand it physically, but it's another thing to understand it in spiritually and mindfully and all of that. And I believe once we understand that collectively as human beings, that's going to be our true evolution to the next stage of this human experience.
Well, you opened the door on that one. First of all, let me say that was beautifully said, and I agree with you. So second, let me say we find ourselves in a surreal and unique moment in time.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, bizarre doesn't quite cut it, right? And I'm seeing what I might call people's true colors, but really, in a way, it's the conditioning or lack of condition. It's the conditioning by choice or by circumstance of their mind, now just sort of coming forward with no filter.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so you've got, I have seen some of the most, like, just, I don't even know the word I want to use, like the most sumptuous conspiracy theories come forward on Facebook lately. There was one that tied in, and I just got to say all these things individually. So it tied in Donald Trump, Brian Epstein, the Clintons, the Wuhan bats, China, 5G, Bill Gates, all into one beautiful conspiracy theory. And I was just like, had to run over and show my wife. I was like, look at this one. This one wins. This is the one right here. Nobody else can touch this one. The only thing they left out was the Illuminati.
Oh, right. I'm sure that was the part 2 of that.
Yeah, part 2 was like it's implied. Duh. Read between the lines.
Right,
so,
right.
What I guess I want to kind of get at is, well, let's just do this. What is happening right now with cognitive biases? Like, how do I don't even know where. There's so many questions I want to ask you about this. You know?
Well, let me say this, and then it may help you to form your question. Okay. Not only is the brain a goal achieving machine,
yeah,
but it needs to make sense of the world. So it's a pattern finding machine.
It's a pattern finding machine as well. Yeah.
Right. It has to be certain of survival. Mm-hmm. It needs to figure out what's happening. That, from our ancient days. So maybe that will guide your question.
Well, I'll tell you what it does do is it shines a light on why it's so hard for us to live in uncertainty. Right?
The mind doesn't like it.
The mind does not like it. By the way, not to pat myself on the back, but do you like the title of our interview?
Before we started, I was like, that's interesting, but it's more captivating than
that's right
to cognitive bias. So
that's just good copywriting. Because I mean, let's face it, right now nobody is going through their day without deciding at least one of their friends are crazy, right? So tell me a little bit from your perspective. I know about cognitive biases from some study and from a boots on the ground layman's kind of perspective, but tell me, like, how do we, like, what the hell are they?
So I train on unconscious bias in organizations, right? And I don't really like to even call it that training.
Okay.
Because it automatically suggests, when you hear unconscious bias, it automatically triggers people. Like, I'm not prejudiced.
Right.
I'm not racist. You automatically, it has a negative connotation.
It does.
Right.
It does.
The word bias.
Yeah.
And that's why I actually like to say that it is a preference. So all biases are not bad. I think it's just been given a bad rap. And if it's negatively affecting other people, then it's negative bias.
Yeah.
And so bias to me is your preference for something. And it's just how the brain works. We have to have preferences, or we'll be spending our time always learning what we prefer.
Right.
It's like, buying a brand of cereal at the store. Well, you don't want, there's like 1,000 brands, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to go down that aisle and read every brand and all the nutritional value and over over again. So you learn to learn to prefer or be biased for a particular brand of cereal.
Sure.
Okay. And we do that all the time. It's the brain's way of conserving energy.
Yeah.
So we prefer a certain toothpaste. We prefer a certain coffee shop, and you can extend that to everything else. We prefer to hang with certain people.
Right.
Think like us.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's how we grew up, right? We just prefer a certain group. So the less and less something is familiar to us, the more stranger it is to the brain, the more we become.
We rely on those. The biases. The
biases, we rely on the biases, but if the situation or people is too far from our, cognitive biases and what we think, believe, and feel, and all of that, then in the brain it registers as a threat.
Oh, okay.
Right. Okay. And we want to move away from it. Right. So let's say in an organization, someone is looking at resumes. Yeah. And we're used to Bob, David, Robert, Cynthia, Sarah. Yeah. But then if we get a foreign name, our threat brain kicks in. Even it's unconscious. It's,
right.
If you're not familiar with saying names that are different from yours, or being around people like that, because your experiences just didn't allow you to, your brain is already going to detect something. Oh, that's too different. Yeah. That means that person is not like me. That means that person probably isn't as good as the David or Warren, or so our brains start to reverse the blood flow from our logic brain, from our prefrontal cortex, that will allow us to make a sound decision and read the rest of the resume, non-judgmentally, right? Non-biasedly. Yeah. So biases can be like everyday choosing something, but it can also affect how we make decisions about other people and how we behave with other people. Yeah. And so when we have these neural pathways, whether they're good or bad, we naturally want to confirm those thought patterns. It's just a natural thing that we do. And some of it can be good, some of it, could not be good. And I think what we're seeing on the web and in the political environment and all that, these people are just confirming their biases, their preferences, their belief patterns. It's just a natural thing. And it's unfortunately all those unconscious biases that are surfacing have been sitting there, and they're being elevated, and a lot of them are just not good. Unfortunately.
So biases, heuristics, there are a lot of things I notice in like what I consider like the human experience, that it's almost as though pick your belief system, God, Buddha, Jesus, Jerry Springer, fucking L. Ron Hubbard, whoever, right? The universal intelligence. It's almost as though we are meant to get more interdependent. I really believe this. And my argument is that if the Big Bang started with 3 elements and now we have everything we have, creativity and interdependence is the order of the universe. So, I also think that we are the universe experiencing itself subjectively, but that may be another interview and another conversation. But so here's the thing, right? Like, we can look back over human history and see that the one thing that is sure, it may move like the GDP line where it's down, up, but it trends upward toward more sophistication, more interdependence, more, it's always trending upward in a positive direction, ultimately.
Yes.
This moment right here in time is buck wild insane, but the larger moment in time is the best in human history. Right? And it's always been like that. It was like that 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Each moment was the best moment in human history if you don't get too micro with it. So with that having been said, I feel like our evolution, our spiritual or whatever you want to call it, kind of evolution, the collective consciousness also moves like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe it's a rocky journey, but it's on an upward trend all the time.
Yeah.
I think that these things like biases, heuristics, those old drives from the reptilian brain, they go into this interesting category for me of things that at one point served us, but now we have to get past them.
Yeah.
Right. There, it seems to me there's this whole, so biases are in that, like nervous system reactions to, like, I know for me, when I was a kid, I lived in fear a lot. I lived in a bad neighborhood. I was the wrong color in that neighborhood. I was a hippie kid in a financially really depressed ghetto where there were no white kids. It was like, it was out of a book, you know, it was. And so in my case, just to use a really sort of oversimplified example, for many, many years, I was afraid of Mexican kids. Because I fought them every day. You know what I mean? And as I got older and I started to realize, like, violence isn't coming to find me every single day anymore. And it hasn't for years and years and years now. I opted consciously to go through a process of undoing that bias. Yeah. Because it's just stupid to walk around as a grown-up ducking around the corner every time I see a Mexican guy. You know what I mean? It's like there's no.
That's why it's so important that leaders don't generalize groups of people by saying they're rapists and murderers, first of all, right? It's very important how we talk about groups of people who have been marginalized. Yeah. You know, there's a history of marginalization.
Yeah, right.
Of a whole group of people. And people may not think that they're prejudiced or have stereotypes, but our brain, we operate 90% of subconsciously, because that's just effective for the brain and how it utilizes and conserves energy. Right. But so when the media, like when the news, I'm talking about not just in 2020, I'm talking about in 1910, I'm talking about the 1950s and the 1960s, when they are projecting, you know, stereotypes or what a criminal looks like, or who's more likely to steal. And, you know, you're putting images and books and all of this. This is seeping into people's subconscious mind, and they are creating biases, you know, neural pathways on how they see people and how they treat people and how they engage or not engage with other people, which also, you know, goes into the unconscious negative biases as well. So we have to be very mindful of, like you said, becoming more aware of those negative cognitive biases and really taking the mental effort. And remember, your brain is going to resist using mental energy. It's just like getting healthy, right? Yeah. Your brain is naturally not going to want to exercise. If there's pain involved, you got to get up, you got to get dressed, you got to, you know, exert a lot of mental and physical energy. Your brain is going to want to quit. And most of the time, the people do quit.
It succeeds,
right. So when people, it's much easier to use and stay on our level of thinking and just to confirm, find evidence to confirm. Yeah. Because it takes mental energy to really listen to someone else's point of view and then change all those cognitive pathways. Well, maybe everybody is not rapists and murderers. Right? Yeah. So we gotta be more modern than that. We gotta evolve our humanity. And that's going to take some mental energy. It's going to be uncomfortable because another thing is with the brain, what we know in neuroscience, it's painful to be wrong. So we actually know in the brain that when we are found to be wrong about something or incorrect, the brain registers it as pain in the brain. So your brain is going to naturally want to run away from painful things. And that includes something as simple as being corrected or being wrong. because we naturally feel like we're right. And it feels good to be right, because now every time you're right, there's some dopamine being released, serotonin.
Right.
You know, every time you find that piece of evidence for your
get the quotes up there.
Dopamine, you know, you want to keep going. You know, I found another piece of the puzzle, right? Every time you find someone who thinks along the way you do, you know, that's confirmation, and confirmation feels good. So people don't want to feel wrong. They don't want to change their thinking,
right?
If it's opposite of what they've been thinking for decades. So we gotta, you know, it takes mental energy.
I just have to assume you're right, because I wouldn't know anything about being wrong. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, though.
But even, you know, even that, it makes sense, though. It feels good to be right.
No, it does.
It feels bad to be wrong.
And it's interesting. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I wonder if people understand that it feels good because the brain is saying, here's dopamine, and it feels bad because the brain is saying, here's cortisol, here's adrenaline.
Right.
You know, it's not just like in some abstraction, oh, it feels so good. No, you're getting drugged. You're drugging yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I also want to address, you know, people who are, you know, creating these conspiracy theories. Yes, it does feel good. But people are also operating from their fear brain, just like, you know, you realize as an adult, you know, you're living in fear subconsciously, and you have to bring it to the conscious. This is how people are dealing with their fear. They need to make sense out of something that has not happened before. This is a challenge. They want to naturally figure out, it must be a conspiracy. It must have been created by the Chinese. And, you know, it must have been the Clintons, whatever the hell they talk about. But they're just trying to make sense of it all. My problem with it, and I'm not saying that there's stuff that has happened, especially here in America, to groups and communities that people would never believe unless we had evidence for it. Okay. But I can't dwell on that as a Black woman in America. Okay. I am focused on how can I make people better? How can I help the situation? And I think conspiracies are dangerous because they're adding fuel to the fear. Absolutely. They're not helping with creativity and solution finding and supporting, you know, people on the front lines. I think your mental energy will better be utilized if you're going to use mental energy in those areas that's going to help us overcome this particular challenge. I'm not saying don't explore later on or on your own time, but you know, inserting all these seeds that you can't even prove, you're just conjecturing. All right, it's not helping people overcome their fear and really be in a healthy mindset to, you know, help in the way that they can or be more creative. You're literally stealing your mental energy from your solution finding abilities, from your compassion and empathy, because that takes mental energy to listen empathetically and, you know, do the things that will help somebody else. You're stealing your own mental energy and putting it into a never-ending cycle of conspiracy theories. That's what's happening in the brain. You want to know?
And I do want to know, because without you to tell me, then I have to take the word of the telepathic Wuhan bats, and I don't, you know, I don't I don't want to listen to those guys anymore. They're clearly crazy.
And let me just say, I'm not saying that some of those pieces, they may prove to be true one day. But I'm just saying, in this moment, really just ask yourself, are you helping or hurting?
I think that's good. I think that's good. And I know that at least in my world, in my kind of social media sphere, a lot of people self-identify as leaders. And guess what? To be a leader, you still have to stand tall when you're unsure, right? You still, even when you doubt, you have to be a representative symbol to people who look to you.
Right.
You can't be going crazy with the toilet paper and going crazy with the bats and, you know, and crazy with the Epstein sex island and whatever it all is. Like, you know,
it's not helping.
It's not helping.
And you don't want a community or country. You don't want people operating in fear. So as a leader,
Right.
you have to decide, do you want to get people out of their fear brain?
Right.
Not, not totally, because we are uncertain. Address that. Yes, we are uncertain. These are uncertain times.
Right.
Yes. I understand that you can have fears that you may not, get some financial compensation. But here's what we're working on.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're talking about the Wuhan bats, how the hell is that helping right now?
Yeah, exactly.
But you're talking about microchips in vaccines.
Yeah.
How is that helping right this second?
Right.
Okay, fine. You're not going to take the vaccine, but do you need to tell us about everything? There's formaldehyde in vaccines, and Gates is going to put microchips in it, and you're going to be tracked for the rest of your. How the hell do you actually know that? Where's evidence? That's not proven.
Because so SHONT'E, they looked it up in their gut.
And too.
They researched it in their intuition. Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I do. I'm a connector. That's how I help.
I'm a spiritual leader, therefore I have all the insights, and I'm awakened to the level that nobody else is awakened. So things are just downloaded to me like
downloaded. That's right. Yeah, it was a download. It was a spiritual download.
There you go.
I knew I was going to enjoy talking to you.
Yeah. So, likewise.
Tell me from a neuroscience perspective, can we talk about words and language? Because I'm very, very curious to pick your mind about that.
Yes.
Do you have is there any scientific consensus or even strong opinion on something I believe very, very, I'm convinced of, which is choosing our words is very important because there's an emotional resonance. There's all these things that word choice does that I would suggest that right now would really benefit people.
Okay, so Manny, if somebody called you an idiot, how would that make you feel?
Okay, so honestly, it's going to depend on who says it.
Okay, somebody.
So if you said it at the end of this talk, I'd be sad and surprised and probably a little hurt.
Okay, let's go with that. So,
all right.
Do words matter?
They do. I mean, to me, they absolutely matter.
And what did we learn when we were kids, right? Sticks and stones.
Words,
but no, those words hurt. They shape our belief systems. They shape how we feel about ourselves. They shape if we're going to take action on something or not. So words are very powerful.
Yeah.
And they shape who we are and how we think about ourselves. Now, depending on your level of awareness and how you manage to manage your emotional brain, you can, block some of that blow. But if you're 5 years old and your mom is calling you an idiot, that's going to shape who you are. It may take decades for you to finally realize that, I'm actually not an idiot. But by then you've made a million decisions. Yeah. About how you're conducting your life and who you are. So you probably will, look for other idiots because now you don't feel so alone, because we're, like you said earlier, we're social interconnected beings. So we're going to choose to be around people who are not going to make us feel like crap, right? Yeah. And so maybe that kid doesn't take chances on things or apply to certain schools or whatever. Right. So change the whole trajectory. And we also know in neuroscience, when we are feeling a certain way, like let's say you did feel all sad because I called you an idiot, which I would never do, Maddie. We know that if you did feel sad and you said, if you told me, you know what, SHONT'E, that really hurt. That really made me feel sad right now. Yeah. That actually deactivates your amygdala, that fear, threat, sad brain, to bump you out of that emotion so it doesn't stay with you and release a bunch of cortisol, hormone and all of that over time. And that's important because when we don't verbally say how we feel, like we hold it all in, that actually increases stress hormone. That actually, and we have a part of the brain our emotions are attached to our hippocampus, which is a part of our memory. So the stronger that emotion, the stronger that memory gets sealed in neural pathways and gets, all those other memories that made you feel like crap and sad. But once you give it a name, once you name your emotion, we know that quiets down the amygdala, so it's not as strong, not as powerful. Now you can access more of your prefrontal cortex to be able to have a conversation with me, and and we can have that dialogue, from that higher brain versus getting into argument mode or whatever. So words that's the conclusion.
That's fascinating. The part about what happens when you name the feeling and name the experience. That part I didn't know. I remember I'm working on a sort of a autobiography of my dad's life, and I don't know much about him, and so it's really an interesting process because he was a brilliant storyteller, but he was a known scoundrel and a known liar, right? And so I don't know what of his stories were true or not, but what I do know is that his father didn't know what to do with him. His father had 3 working class steel mill town kids and 1 kid who was like a fucking alien. And that was my dad. My dad showed incredible aptitude for the saxophone when he was like 8 years old. He went on to be like one spotlight away from famous. He played with all the great jazz musicians and everything. And I always wondered, like, why didn't he get famous? What was it? Because he played with Charlie Parker. He played with Dizzy Gillespie. He played with these guys. And I was like, how come, where's the connection there? And I honestly believe that the connection is that he never found a way to get out from under the words his dad used. I really believe that. And I remember in the book, I said, my grandfather killed my father long before I was born, as I imagine his father did to him. And it was with just, my dad's name was Steve. Steve, you're worthless. You're a piece of crap. You're never going to amount to nothing. What the hell's wrong with you? And it was weird because I did get to meet my dad a little bit, and he knew he was a genius. He had no question about it. All he had to do was play with other people and he could see.
Yeah.
It would be like if the Hulk and you were lifting weights together, he's going to figure out he's stronger than you pretty soon.
Right.
But he sort of died of a broken heart because he never was able to reconcile that. And as an interesting side note, he literally died from an abscess on his heart.
Wow.
And I think that it's all kind of powerfully talks about the power of words. To me, I go, is it just a coincidence that he had a broken heart from his father all his life, and then he dies from an abscess on his heart? I don't think so. But more germane to what we're talking about is that I could see it on him, that he was never able to fully shed the things his dad said to him, even though he knew he had a gift that other people didn't have.
Yeah.
And so I suppose I present that as a cautionary tale about the power of words.
Right.
I really love getting confirmation from you about that.
Confirm everything now. That's the beauty of neuroscience now. And of course, that's what I train coaches and leaders to understand. Their impact on other people is real. Yeah. Okay. So even in this day and time, with all the challenges, we still have to be so careful with our words because they are affecting other people. So
what I would say too, to sort of put a bow on top of that, is when we meet someone who is really deliberate, really conscious and present with their word choice, we may not be able to say that's what it is about them, but that person really stands out. It's a very, very powerful component of sort of embodied leadership.
Well, we're wired to pick up on people's energy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say in our hunter-gathering days, right?
Yeah.
If a stranger comes into the tribe, we're reading that person before they even enter all the way. We need to know open hands, you know, are they smiling, or do they look like they're ready to fight or something? We need to pick up on body language, energy way before, because it's a survival mechanism. So before people even speak, we can kind of get an understanding of how we feel about them. That's why emotions are still powerful. We just need to learn how to use them more powerfully. And they can influence how we talk, how we behave, how we make decisions, how we interact with people as well. So it all works together.
It all works together. I was really looking forward to this, and I knew it was going to be a lot of fun, and you did not disappoint. You want to do the thing where you tell people where they can find you?
I'll do that thing.
Do that thing.
Well, you can find me everywhere, basically on every social media platform, just about all the popular ones. LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook a lot, as you know, Manny. And I also have a website, just my name, SHONT'ETaylor.com. And I am the founder of the Optimind Institute. So you can see me there as well. So you can, if you're looking, if you're being intentional, you can follow me and learn more from me and learn how to take your brain to the next level as well. So there you go.
Which I highly suggest you all do. There's absolutely no reason today for you high achievers not to be looking at how you can get that advantage, get that edge. And after speaking with you, I really feel like you're a great resource for people. I want to thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for inviting me on your platform and, you know, sharing your gifts with the world and trying to, you know, change the world for the better. I always appreciate people like yourselves who are doing that. So it's my honor. Thank you.
All right, well, then we're both honored.